Hello, Wacom family. The human face is definitely a subject which artists of all eras have worked on most diligently. That's why I think it's a good idea to look closely at the individual parts of the face one by one. The mouth, compared to eyes and noses, I think is a feature of the face with much more variety. Therefore, I've selected a cross-section of different styles and positions, as you can see. In this tutorial, we will concentrate on the approach I personally prefer. Let's begin with the position of the mouth. After we have constructed the head, the guidelines will give us the vertical position. The mouth lies on the first subdividing line between nose and chin. This means the distance from mouth to chin should be about twice the distance from mouth to nose. The width of the average mouth is at most as wide as the distance between the pupils. Experience shows that we should reduce this width a bit. First, we draw a simple line. This is the main line of the mouth, the lower edge of the upper lip. Starting with this line is the quickest, most intuitive way to define a mouth shape. The line doesn't have to be perfectly straight, of course. Next, we add the upper lip V at the midpoint of the main line. It can be anything from sharply pronounced or not present at all. At the beginning, let's limit ourselves to a very subtle V. Make sure that the lines of the V are not straight, but curved slightly downwards. On each of the two outer edges, we add a comma, the corners of the mouth. These two commas will to a large extent eventually determine the overall expression of the mouth. When drawing the upper lip, it helps to first construct a flattened trapezoid in order to make sure that it is as symmetrical as possible. Now we draw the contour of the upper lip as elegantly as possible using the trapezoid construction. It should rise gently from the sides and also form a small V-shaped indentation in the middle. You will notice that the difficulty in drawing this line lies in making sure that it is neither too round nor too angular. Finally, the lower lip is a simple flat U. The U should point towards each corner of the mouth, but in most cases it is a good idea to not connect the corners of the mouth with the lower lip. Another inverted U is there to indicate the chin. This chin U now lies precisely upon the lower of the two head shape construction guidelines. Now let's have a look what we can do with the corner commas first. They can go upwards or more downwards, more thick or thin, or even you can also experiment with more crazy shapes for the corners of the mouth. You should keep in mind that tiny changes in these little inconspicuous commas can significantly influence the expression of the face you are drawing. It is not the main line, but about 90% it's these commas that decide if your face will look happy or sad or whatever. The shape of the upper lip can vary greatly depending on the face. Narrow upper lips tend to look more masculine and wider ones more feminine. A flattened V indentation can also give the upper lip a more feminine look. But this does not mean that women always got wider lips than men, of course. It is not a rule at all. The lower V can also take on different shapes. It can be more pronounced or less, or semicircular, or not there at all. Finally, the lower lip can also deviate from the U shape and, for example, become flatter towards the middle or sometimes even rise slightly. The more of these variations you know, the richer your possibilities and ideas when drawing different mouths. Next, we open the mouth. There are a number of things to bear in mind here. The wider the mouth opens, the narrower it becomes both in overall width and in the lips. If the mouth is wide open, the lips are stretched and therefore thinner. The two V's of the upper lip also progressively flatten. The teeth are easiest to show if you ignore the spaces between them. Reducing the rows of teeth in continuous surfaces is helpful because spaces drawn between teeth run the risk of looking instead like gaps between teeth. If you still want to show the teeth individually, it helps to draw the spaces as finely as possible. Normally, the bottom row of teeth is only visible when the mouth is open really wide. Here you can also hint at the palate and tongue, but it is usually sufficient to represent the mouth interior as a continuous dark surface. Therefore, let's not go into too much detail here. Now we draw the mouth in profile. Let's start again with the main line, including the comma at the corner of the mouth. In profile, the upper lip has the shape of a trapezoid tilted sharply forward. It protrudes noticeably from the shape of the head. The lower lip should have a roughly rectangular shape, overlapped by the upper lip. It's best to start with two nearly parallel lines pointing downward. Now we finish off the rectangle of the lower lip. Note that the lower lip usually protrudes less from the face than the upper lip. And finally, we connect the upper and lower lips with the nose and the chin. Of course, you can also include the two V's, but make sure that in profile, the lower V gets overlapped by the main line from the left. This method of construction tends to offer a lot of freedom. You can decide for yourself what proportions to use, what angles your line will run, how sharp or soft the edges should be, and whether individual lines should curve inwards or outwards, or perhaps take on S shapes. Nearly anything is possible here. Let's try mouth in some other perspectives. Always start with the main line, because it is what the rest of the construction is based on. The main line follows the curve of the head. If the head tilts upward, the main line becomes an upward curve. If the head tilts downward, the curve of the main line also points downward. Additionally, whether the head is facing upward or downward, we have to consider that the angle of view on the lips also changes. Certain areas of the lips become narrower or wider in perspective. If we turn the head far enough downward, the upper lip disappears completely. Now let's add a little shade to the lips. The mouth in front of you lends itself well to this. If you're working digitally, best use the following steps on separate layers each. First of all, we fill the entire lip area with a medium gray tone. Most of the shadow of the lips is created along the main line. The shade should be slightly darker than the background layer, but not so dark as to overshadow the outlines. The shadow area follows the lip shape above and below the main line respectively. Let's now define the two lightest areas. These are at the top of the upper lip and at the bottom directly below the drop shadow, bean-shaped one on the lower lip. Because lips tend to have a bit of shine, the light areas can be easily drawn in white with hard edges. Finally, in order to add texture, interrupt the two white areas in some places. The easiest way to do this is to make some quick stripes on the plane of the white area with an eraser. The interruptions should always run radially from the center line up and down. Think of it like the rays of an almond-shaped sun. With a little practice, this somewhat abstract bold shading method works very well, and it is also quite easy to apply to different perspectives. But let's go ahead and try a more detailed version anyway. If you want to draw lips a little more realistically, you can do the following. Lips have a lot of very fine vertical wrinkles. These can be easily simulated by filling the lips with many thin, slightly outward curving strokes. Let's start at the left edge and work your way inward to the center. When you reach the center, rotate your work surface. This is the easiest way to change the direction of the curve. It is best to use only about 30% opacity and draw the strokes as quickly as possible, similar to hatching. It doesn't matter at all if your hatching goes beyond the edge of the lip, because you can simply erase all the overhanging hatching at the end. Now repeat the same process on a separate layer, but this time in white. So we got these two texture layers now. One more thing to go much more into detail is to divide the main line into many overlapping hues. Try to vary as much as possible: wide hues, narrow hues, high hues, and flat hues. Always let the ends taper upward. The slope of the hues gets flatter towards the sides, mirroring these thin texture lines we did before. And always position the lower edges of the hues on your main line. Now each step is on its own layer. This will give us the flexibility to add the finishing touches. First, we can reduce the opacity of individual layers to fit them together better. In a few areas, the structure seems exaggerated. You can remove these areas carefully with a soft eraser. I will remove the black structure along the upper edge of the upper lip. And on the lower lip, I only want the bean-shaped area of the white texture left. Also, the outer edges of the lips still look a bit too hard now, so we can soften the edge of the gray background area. Now we use shadows to give the lips even more depth, similar to the abstracted mouth before, but this time with softer edges. We will need the heaviest shadows directly below the main line. The shadow here can be very dark, almost black. We again define two areas of light, one at the top of the upper lip and an almond-shaped one below the drop shadow of the lower lip. You don't necessarily have to follow my shapes exactly here. Instead, just try to imagine which areas of the lips get the most light. Finally, we can add the same gloss layer of the abstracted version and edit it a bit. Of course, not every mouth must be drawn with as much detail as in the last example, but there are of course no limits of the amount of detail. Decide for yourself which level of detail is suitable for your picture. I hope you had fun taking part and that you have taken one or two good tips away with you for future drawings. So, see you next time.